Well, hello everybody. This is a
Hello.
little late than usual, but some scheduling stuff come about, and at the end of the day, we get to talk about a little bit more of the week. This is Vision Denial and our World Watch, where we talk about the trends we've been seeing before Worlds comes around. My name is Sam, and that right there
I'm Connor.
is Connor. And I want to start off by talking about a particular champion of which I'm really interested in your thoughts on hit Varus versus lethality Varus. Right? And for me personally, I think it makes no difference of the composition or the type of composition it's facing against. It really seems to be a playstyle preference from team to team. I'll see a team face off against the
I
same
think it's a big
composition.
difference.
Okay.
Well, okay. So lethality Varus is the poke. So it's saying I'm taking advantage of the fact that my Q has such a long range, and I'm just going to sit back, pull a Q, do some damage, and I'm not actually trying to get within auto attack range. I don't care about actually auto attacking something. It's just I'm gonna do damage with Qs, and maybe if I'm getting engaged on, or like my teammates are, some because they're further up than I am.
Right.
I might do an auto attack or something, but I'm just trying to poke, and I'm trying to win the game that way. By doing enough damage, I'm going to chunk someone. I chunk you 2 or 3 times. Now you can't stay in the fight. Now I can push you off a bear and do different things like that. Whereas beyond hit Varus is taking advantage of like his passive and stuff. It's like I'm going to auto attack you a few times, and then once you're like, oh, I need to get out of this fight or something, I can then shoot you with a Q as you're running away, trigger my passive, right? These kinds of things. It's a totally different playstyle.
No, and I totally understand that. My question, more or less, and I think I didn't explain it right, is that
Sure.
It seems to me that regardless of the kind of composition it's facing or the kind of composition that it's in, you could have the same scenario twice, and a player will opt into 2 different ones, right? You'll have players who will say, regardless of facing off against another poke composition or facing off against another team fight composition, will opt to on hit or lethality regardless of the benefits for one or the other, as if it's a preference of playstyle.
The person.
Right?
For sure.
Right? Yeah. And my question, I guess, comes along to, do you think there is one that is better than the other, given the fact that pros are doing a preference more than there is an actual compositional choice in the matter?
That's true. It's a good question. It's like on hit Varus definitely isn't bad. I think the main reason we started seeing Varus played and the reason why he is meta in professional play is because of lethality Varus.
Yeah.
Likely because of the fact that he can outrange things.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So like if you're playing on hit Varus, really, like if you're trying to be an auto attack range, like for example, Varus is an immobile AD carry with has the potential to root someone. Like, okay, if you're playing on hit Varus, is on hit Varus as good as Aphelios? Really, right? At doing the same thing. It's like, wouldn't Aphelios do the job of being an immobile AD carry, trying to do damage with his auto attacks and these kinds of things, potentially better than on hit Varus? I think that's the question there.
I would also posit that the other on-hit immobile AD carry is Ashe, and Varus tends
but
to.
Ashe is bringing different things to the table than.
Well, no, and the same thing that Varus would bring to the table than Aphelios, right? Aphelios is not just an immobile on-hit AD carry, right? Aphelios does have a fair amount of variety of terms of poke. is sieging AD carry, right? Like it's Aphelios is the jack of all trades, master of none,
True. You can
ADC.
switch.
So like making the comparison between the two, I don't think is just like doesn't.
No, that's fair. That's fair. It's likely the closest thing.
It's likely the
It's
closest
like
thing.
Aphelios can do all that he can likely do all that on hit Varus can do in terms of
Right, right. And so
likely, right? He can still poke. He can still
yeah, and so like I guess what you mean then is that because Aphelios exists and is a fairly meta pick, why not opt into picking Aphelios when you're going to play on hit Varus? And if you're going to pick
instead.
Varus, why not stick to poke? Because it seems that poke Varus is very unique to the circumstance of the current meta. Okay. I'll posit one, bans exist, but like
True. Yeah.
ignoring bans, right? There are times where like Aphelios is not even banned at all, and they'll still do on hit Varus, which to me signifies that the pro player who makes that choice thinks that like it is safer to pick Varus, right? There's an innately longer range for the aspect of it of the on hit being effective, but also it tends to bring more utility no matter what, right? Imagine the combination of the ability to poke as well as the on hit effects that you would usually benefit from having an Ashe or an Aphelios, but guaranteeing a secondary or re-engage option. And anybody else would say, and this I don't have like a solid answer to this. To me,
because
my
Graphitum Aphelios
exactly.
has to have the right gun out.
Yeah, exactly.
Even right. So,
and to me, I don't have like a solid answer. To me, I think if I was to make a choice, I would prefer the poke Varus and then make a composition around that, as opposed to just picking Varus as if it's just a pick to have, and then the player decides the preference to work with.
yeah.
But I don't have a solid argument against it either. Do you know what I mean? Like, I don't have a solid argument against on hit Varus that is justifiable outside of like, why didn't you pick Vayne then? And Vayne, I already will go like, unless Ziggs is picked already, picking Vayne makes no sense. So like, to me, there was an argument
picking
for
Vayne into a Sejuani or something makes sense, but
what I mean though is that like Vayne to, I think I've expressed this in like the last year's podcast of like, if an ADC picks Vayne, they are signifying automatically that they are way better than you in that role. By default, that's always been the case. That's literally what it signifies. That's why people are hyped. The reason why I'm not so bothered by it now when there's a Ziggs present is one, it's a fantastic like counter for it, and two, I think it has like a virtual like 99% win rate against it at this point. I will have to double check that.
We saw even the LCS playing Vayne into Ziggs.
I was so happy to see that. I was like,
yes. I saw that locked in, and I was like, I know who's going to be really happy.
Oh, so good.
I know who's going to be happy.
So like to circle back again, it's I think there's an argument to be made for either one of the Varuses, where I would prefer the on hit because it tends to have a higher success rate and it tends to have a better presence. The issue is that it in straight up, it is more difficult to it is a much more difficult build to actually like fill up its win condition, especially in the sense of the composition when a lot of teams have been defaulting to team fights. Lethality Varus on team fights is not as successful as on hit Varus.
Yeah, it's true. Yep. When you get stuck, when they can engage right away on top of you and be like, Rakan or something was like jumping on you, your lethality Varus isn't necessarily going to do as much damage.
Yeah, exactly.
I did also see Europe, because Europe, pick Vayne into Pyke, which is a good matchup for Vayne. Having played a fair bit of Pyke, Vayne's a difficult matchup for you because when you go to stun her, she just dashes away. So
Yeah,
like you
but I feel like
never hit her with
that's
a stun.
most mobile ADCs. I don't know if that was necessarily because I do remember that, and I don't know if I
And she can also like
necessarily.
knock you out of your ult and stuff with
Mm-mm.
the condemn. Like it's a good matchup for the Vayne.
It's a good matchup for the
So
Vayne. I don't know if I was a big fan of it when it was picked,
no,
because
but
like to me the Vayne doesn't offer enough until it's way too late, and it needs to be in a matchup where like it literally can just get to that point and it'll scale faster, better than its opposition.
no, but Pyke is only good like really in the early game. Like if he doesn't get his alt kills and he doesn't
Yep.
get anything going, he'll just fall off and do nothing.
Mm-hmm.
So Vayne can be like, okay, I'm just gonna not die to you, and now you're useless in the late game. So that
Yeah.
just an
Yeah.
option for Vayne. That's all.
Right. So that was like my immediate thought from this. For like that was the one that I was thinking. The second thing that came to mind here is that I've been noticing a trend of two very obvious composition types, right?
Okay.
Because there are, for many people who may not know, there are technically about like 5 to 6 different composition types that exist when you're doing drafting. There's your skirmish, there's your team fight, there's your objective, there's your siege, and then there's your wave management compositions. And like you can mix and match and have varying styles between the two, but the core win conditions usually fall into one of those 5 to 6. I don't remember I counted them all right. Yeah,
Just out of curiosity, what would you call like a Yi funnel comp?
a funnel comp.
Yeah, just curious. Not that it's good or anything.
That would be that'd be a wave management comp, right?
Because you're controlling it. Yeah.
Because you're managing waves and resources to eventually gain the ability to
Gain
split push
advantages.
compositions are wave management compositions, right?
Controlling side lanes in order to get advantages elsewhere and stuff.
Exactly, right?
Yep.
As well, like as opposed to siege compositions, which are inherently meant to siege turrets to eventually gain advantages later on. And you'd be some of you might ask, well, that doesn't sound like there's a big of difference. There is, because like a wave management composition is not concerned with getting turrets quickly or getting their advantages through turrets necessarily. They're concerned about getting resources
Yes.
around the map through the
Stealing
manipulation of the
jungle
waves. And if they get turrets as a consequence of that, that's because they had planned the management of their waves to get that point.
Mhm.
And then skirmish comps and team fight comps are fairly obvious. And I already forgot what the fifth one was. It was the I have had a long day. I've watched all of this series. For those who don't know, we are recording this on the 29th, but at like midnight on the 29th. So like 5 hours before the LPL losers finals. Or technically also the 5 hours before the Japanese losers finals. And 5 hours before
sleep, right?
the what's the other one? There's 3 of them playing at the same time. And then and then the grand finals for the PCS. So yeah. There's quite a bit on top of the fact that there's going to be the final. I'm not going to be able to watch all of those live, but I've been up for quite some time for myself. I'll look back and I'll be like, oh yeah, that's what I said. But there's like the 5 fundamental types of compositions, and I found that the 2 kinds of compositions that teams are opting into are siege and wave management compositions. And yet they are playing them as if they are skirmish or team fight compositions. Do you understand what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, we are seeing a lot of the just Ziggs being in the meta is by default like the
it's Ziggs being in the meta, and
it is
anything that's a
wave
wave clear focus will be a
yeah.
wave management composition by default.
Yeah.
And it's not to say that like, oh, by default there should not be any team fights. There are going to be team fights by natural consequences of like contesting objectives and everything. But I find that, and this is especially true of the emerging regions, is that the win conditions have not been recognized on how to approach the resources or the steps that you need to get to that point. And the default and the autopilot for a lot of teams and a lot of players across the skill board is to gain advantages through picks, so skirmish type of composition, or through team fights around an objective once you've set it up. And like, that's not holistically wrong, but it is not approaching your composition with its win condition in mind. And to me, I'm a little concerned because you'll see other teams who are very high up on the ladder who, like, to me, right now, the two favorites, and I'll probably talk about this a little bit later, but the two favorites to win the whole thing right now are FPX and Damwon Kia. And, like, and people will be like, well, no shit, I was going to be the ones that are going to win. I don't think you understand the absolute like ocean in their own region of skill they are difference. It is quite terrifying. But I don't find that those teams ever at any point default to team fighting unless that has been opted into them. They're always approaching their win conditions in a way that is mindful of the pace that they need to like hit at every margin. And if ever a team approaches them into team fighting, they've already hit a lot of their milestones for their win conditions to be able to like accept the team fight in and of itself with no consequence. I think the only other teams that are doing that in a way that's like satisfying is on occasions T1 and Mad Lions, which are more like my third and fourth place. Right?
Okay, it's exactly what I was about to add in. I was like, I would agree with that. I was just going to add in Mad Lions look good.
Yeah, Mad Lions is actually quite phenomenal. And I may not be able to...
they do the same thing. They'll play like the Twisted Fate or things like that. They're playing their side lanes like, okay, they don't force the team fights or anything unless like...
Yeah, exactly. And
unless they choose to have the advantage.
Yes. And it's one of those things that like I'm concerned going in to worlds that their teams have not had... Because this is like a weird environment to have an entire year for sure in pandemic. Like a lot of other teams started the year last year not in pandemic mode. And then they had to quickly shift gears. But this time, the entire time they've been in pandemic mode, and it's kind of hard to like figure out things and communicate between teams because like unless you're actually competing against them. The thing that concerns me is that I don't think people are reading their win conditions in a way that's effective, and it kills the pacing of their matches. I will watch literally an LCK game that involves either T1 Genji or Damwon Kia. Heck no, actually all of the top 6 that were in LCK had crazy good pacing. There would be the occasional game where a team straight up did not recognize their win condition properly or didn't approach it in the right way, and then it would like stall. But I never ever found myself watching a game that was like reaching its 40-minute mark, its 45-minute mark, its 50-minute mark. And that to me, given the style of the meta at this point, your game should never be longer than 36 minutes. If you're ahead, because some casters I mentioned, the meta right now is snowbally as heck. And if you are ahead, you should be approaching the meta not in a way that forces a team fight against your opponent, but that forces your opponent to do a team fight against you in an unfavorable position because you are managing the waves or you're sieging in a way that makes it hard for them to do anything. European casters talk about it a lot, and I think it's silly. They'll say, like, what do you do in that scenario? He can't do anything. It makes me laugh all the time. But that right there, when they say that, that immediately evokes to me that they have approached the scenario properly, where the other team either has to force themselves to make an error for a low percentage play,
Mhm.
or do the smart thing and lose by guarantee lose out.
Okay, but I can see like the game I'm thinking of is I guess it's the early playoffs, but like G2 Mad Lions, where like Mad Lions won a game against Ocean Soul, against multiple Baron buffs and these kinds of things. It took them a while, but they basically, gave up what they needed to. They said, okay, we're not going to fight you for Ocean Soul. We're not going to fight you on the Baron. And waited because they had like a Twisted Fate and stuff. I was like, okay, we're going to wait until you are overextended in a side lane, pushing
Mm-hmm.
with your Baron to like catch someone. Okay, now we can force a 5v4. They're giving up what they need to, giving up time. Like they won in like 38, 39, like it was
Yep.
longer. But like they gave stuff up saying, okay, we're not the stronger team fight. We can't fight you on this Baron,
Mm-hmm.
but we can make a pick, then fight 5v4.
Right.
They know what their win condition is essentially. They're
Yeah.
not the stronger team fight team, but we
Right.
have a Twisted Fate. We can get a pick.
Yeah. Exactly.
Right.
They did exactly that. Like in the scenario that you're describing, the smart move is the losing move, and yet they still won that game despite it taking a long time, because that just tells me that G2 were not the ones operating on their win conditions properly.
That's fair. Okay. Yeah.
Right? And like, spoilers for anybody who has not caught up on anything, they're eliminated. They have not qualified for Worlds. Uh, Given the momentum that Fnatic had, I was not surprised. Um,
Oh yeah. That's very soon.
I mean, like, they got their comeuppance. I don't know what to say. Uh,
That was a interesting series.
it,
The Darius.
it was fun. I can say for a fact that I was like, oh yeah, that was a little satisfying to watch. I do think Fnatic has actually a chance to grab the first seed. I've put them,
Yeah.
I think, sixth in the world out of the 14 that have 13? Yeah,
I would
13.
quite enjoy a Fnatic Mad Lions final. Is that
That's what the final is.
it is the final? Oh, look at
That
that.
Yeah.
I am looking forward to the final then. I wasn't sure if that was confirmed yet.
Yeah,
Okay.
no, it's confirmed.
Okay.
Against
Okay.
Rogue, I'm putting Rogue really far down, but then again, it's not really a surprise. Um, Rogue have been a disappointment, but they're a disappointment every year. I'm just happy that they improve every year to be a little less of a disappointment.
Yeah.
Right. We sidetracked quite a bit. The point the point that I was trying to get to is that, like, I find it bizarre that unless a team has properly drafted a team fight composition, a front to back composition,
Okay.
that they'll oftentimes opt into drafting a wave management composition, or a sieging composition, and use it like it's a team fight composition or a skirmish composition. And I think it's a weird trend.
Yeah. Is it? Hmm. But is there a thing where it's like, well, maybe we are not specifically a team fight composition, right? But our opponent's composition is even worse of a team fight composition than us. So it's like, sure, we're a wave management team, but we're still better at team fighting than they are. If we're both not team fight compositions,
Right. Okay.
so therefore it's the right move for us.
Sure. Yeah. If you force them into a situation where they have to team fight, which should be your aim. Your aim should be to force them to make the error, not to opt into the bad move first.
Yeah.
That's more of where I was going with it, because, like, and this is just to speak on, like, on a wide horizon. There are only 3 teams that I see that trend away from this problem. And
You're right, and I think it's partially like a meta thing too, because it's like
yeah,
teams will pick like Ziggs and Xin Zhao, and it's like, well, those two champions do not want the same things.
yep, correct.
Really, it's like Ziggs is the ultimate. Like, yeah, we're gonna siege towers and we're gonna, get CS and like push the side lanes. These they pick like Ryze and like the Xin Zhao and the jungle meta and the Viego. It's like, okay, the Viego wants to fight. The Viego excels if he wants to get into the team fight, get his resets, get his stuff done. So we pick all these team fight junglers and stuff. But then our solo laners and our bot lane and stuff just don't want to fight.
Yep.
So the jungler's like, yeah, I'm gonna fight, guys. I'm Viego. I can get my resets off. I can do this. And then the AD carry's like, I'm playing Tristana. I want to go hit that tower, or whatever you maybe like.
Yeah, and I think you hit the nail. You hit the nail on a coffin. Yes, that's right. Where like, because of the stylization of some of the champions, their intuitive design and their intuitive and the goal that they reach,
Yep.
oftentimes clashes with the whole of the composition. And it's always I've always found it interesting because a lot of these teamfight junglers function fantastically as disengage options also.
Yep.
That like they're meant to help skirmish early to get solo laners ahead so that the solo laners can either be good at sieging and or wave management later down the line, and they use those to be able to secure neutral objectives because the game is focused on a very neutral objective and tower basis and not by team fighting. And yet, because those same champions excel at team fighting, players have opted in automatically to that mindset. And I think it's a lack of it's not it's a lack of restraint. It's a lack of restraint. Right? And if ever any of you who have the chance watch the finals for LCK, one, because it's historical as heck, it's fantastic, but two, you'll see actually what I'm talking about as T1 had opted into being really good at their approach to their win conditions, and then in the finals it goes to the wayside completely as a form of like opting into skirmish opting in to act like as if they have a skirmish composition for like what was the final score on that one?
Yeah, it's true because I don't think the people are like the drafting word is strong, but like I don't know. Personally, I like to think of it as like, okay, what is our like they talk about like these like wombo combo comps with like for team fights. But it's like even when you're not, it's like you pick your team comps. Okay, what is our dream fight? Like what is our goal with it? Like if we hit every ability exactly how we want to, what does this look like? It's like how does like the synergy between these champions work? And it's like a lot of the times it's like, well, they don't necessarily. They're playing the comps that don't really have like their abilities don't sync up well. Right?
Yeah, exactly, and it becomes like a high difficulty composition. And I think it's also, and this leads into my next thing, is that I think that this is the most competitive year and the least competitive year in two aspects.
Okay.
The top 8 are going to be competitive as heck. Everybody else will be competitive with themselves. And then the gap between the two is huge as heck. And the reason for this is that these teams are doing fantastic team fights. Like, I have had very few team fights that I'm looking at this going like, what the fuck are they doing? What the hell is up with the target selection? But the problem comes with what I mentioned beforehand is that what I would call like the lower ranked teams or the teams from lower seeded regions, or even like lower seeded teams in major regions, have defaulted into the approach of team fights using high difficulty approaches, right? Their team fights are what I would call like, there's like the high difficulty compositions and the low difficulty compositions. And that's like another fancy way of saying which ones are press R to win, which ones are not. And then there's like a scale between the two. And because the meta requires wave management and sieging, you're aiming more in the high difficulty approach. Hence why I think because they're playing all of these high difficulty compositions, competition at Worlds will be really close, but there's going to be a huge gap between top 8 and everybody else because the teams that are in the top 8 are more likely to approach them through the win conditions as opposed to just team fighting, and the others are approaching them through team fighting primarily unless they're their win conditions.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. Yeah, because you're right. Because you look at some of these compositions, like I found watching them, it's like I like the idea behind, like surprisingly Fnatic. Like you look at their team comps, and it's like this. They're picking things that make sense to do. Like they have the skirmish options and stuff. They're not like the disengage, as you're saying, but they still have great wave management. Like they're picking a lot of like a Camille,
Yep.
and it's like that's in this current meta. I don't think it's being played necessarily worldwide as much, but like I quite like Camille as a pick in the current meta. It's like, okay, you have your side lane options. You can do stuff. You can split push. You can teleport into things. You can do so much with the Camille. You have that go button of the R where it's like, okay, I press R, we focus this person. As like it's easy for your team to say like, okay, Camille's ulting this person, we're doing it. It's fairly easy to play. We have the side lane options. But we also have good team fight options with her ultimate, with what you can do there. So it's like when we have the mobility, we can like the distance you can cover with the hook shot and stuff. It's like it's quite good in the current meta. Almost like we're seeing a lot of like the Jax in China. It's like, why aren't people playing Jax? It can team fight. You land a good Jax stun, you get in there. It's like it can do a lot, but at the same time, it's like, do you want to fight a Jax in a side lane? No, you don't.
I think that's why we're seeing a lot of Jace and Gangplank worldwide. Like that's the most consistent. Sorry, worldwide out of the legacy regions or like the major regions, so the top 5.
Yep.
Jace is universal across the board. There's not a single region that doesn't pick Jace.
Like Jace, Renekton, Gangplank, pretty
are the big 3.
Yeah.
Renekton is the default top laner. It's neither. It's primarily a skirmish option, but Gangplank and Jace, however, are malleable options. Who, at this point, function primarily for both siege and wave management. And because they have solid team fighting options, they're highly sought after, but the problem is also that their team fighting options are complicated as heck.
Yeah. Same with like a LeBlanc or something.
No, correct. Absolutely correct. Are there any from? There's not much more that I think that we can cover with this, primarily, unless you have like an extra little thought before we move on to the next trend that I.
No, I.
All right, then I'll pass the question off to you. Is there a trend that you've noticed, or that you think has been like, that's interesting?
Yeah, I was just saying, like, I thought it was really cool this week, just how, a lot of the things we were mentioning is like, okay, we would like to see, like, for example, in the LTS, we would like to see them incorporate some of these things from other region, and then they did. They played the Ashe. They hadn't played it all, but we'd seen elsewhere, and like they played the Vayne into Ziggs, and like a few of the things that we had mentioned we'd like to see actually really happen this week. So I thought that was cool. We even saw like the AP top laners at least like considered and these kind of things. Just interesting. I'm curious your thoughts on Trundle, just because I'm like, I don't necessarily think it's the best pick. Like, it's certainly a good pick, but it's being like in some cases considered like the I don't know, like top 2 junglers by some teams. I'm curious your thoughts on that because like I don't mind Trundle; it's a good champion, but like Trundle is like the default.
Right. I think Trundle as a jungler is garbage.
Okay, so you agree with me?
It is absolutely terrible, and not because like it should not be not because it has no good matchups in the jungle. I think it's because it takes away from your options that you could have had elsewise, and it would have been a much stronger option as support, and you tend to pick a weaker option as support. So you've scaled down your options as opposed to using Trundle as what I think should have been exclusively a support. Or if you're really gung ho about it, a top laner.
Well, like
As an
I don't mind
answer,
Trundle.
yeah, go ahead.
My only thing with Trundle support as a support main is like, well, if you're picking it into an aftershock support, like if you pick it into Leona, sure, because like okay, she gets a bunch of extra resistances, and now I can steal them with the
Mm-hmm.
ultimate. It's like okay, you can now kill the Leona or something. Okay, sure, but like people are even like picking Trundle into Rakan and stuff, and I'm just like, what is this?
Right.
I don't.
I think it's because it's a really good. It's a good disengage, right? And I think it's because the pillar is too strong. I think it's his subjugate, his frozen domain, and his pillar are the primary aspects of why that's happening. It helps with mobility around the map. Map movement is absolutely key.
Yeah,
It's disengage and half engage options from the pillar create a lot of avenues that are really good, but primarily for sieging. Every time I see it as an engage option, like only for your team fights, and they put it with a Vayne, and I almost pulled my hair out. Like you could have picked any other support. Anywho, before I go into that rant, um, but it also adds a lot of survivability to help dissuade tanks, because tanks are team fight options for front to back um, that slow down the game like demonstrably. I think it's like my biggest issue with watching the LCL right now, the Russian league. Mundo is like a priority pick in that region. And the
yeah,
games there are, if I remember correctly, are slower than average than any of the other regions. And I mean any of them. Even Australia, which is like gung ho nonsensical sometimes.
okay,
and and not because like Mundo's a bad pick per se, but I think that like Mundo takes away from what the strongest options are and forces teams to aim for skirmishes in scenarios that you shouldn't at all. Because
yeah,
Mundo is great at wave management in its entirety, and it's hard to like contest a Mundo. But because it's hard to contest a Mundo, you think, "Oh shit, I'm a tank. Let's team fight." I think it's because it informs players to like, uh, it informs players to do the team fighting because they can, because it's Mundo.
yeah. I go where I please. Therefore, if I want to team fight, I will team fight.
Yeah, exactly, right. When I not
Yeah.
necessarily that you should team fight, but if you were to pick Trundle in any other role, I would pick it top lane as a counter to any tanks that are used as an option.
Okay.
Yeah.
But like we've said, the strongest top laners right now specifically are the Renekton, Jace, Gangplank,
Yeah.
Gwen and Kennen being played, and Jax and these things. Like there's not, it's not a huge, like when we see Ornn getting picked, we're like, was that the right thing? Usually. So,
I think it's fine because it has a significantly high wave clear. I,
mhm.
right, it needs to fix its tank and support issues. Uh, so like it technically fills the roles of the main meta, but
What was he gonna answer? It's Ornn. He's an assassin. He's a mage. He's a tank.
He's literally everything. Woo! But it significantly slows down the pacing of the game. And like, look, on a meta where the slow pacing of a game is literally the point, I'm all for it. But when a game should never be longer than 36 minutes, your Ornn's practicality peaks at like past that.
Yeah. No, I guess it's true because like in a game where it's like you can win off of like for example, if you get the second Elder Dragon, you're in a very good spot to win. So it's like if you're a team with a big lead, it's like you never ever want the game to go to a second Elder Dragon.
No.
It's probably yeah.
Hell, you don't even want the game to go to a first Elder Dragon. Whenever I see teams go for 2 to 3 Barons, I go, why didn't you close it out earlier? Why did you not set yourself up to close out the game appropriately?
Wow, if you're taking the first one at like 23 and the second one at like 31 or something, it's
okay. Yeah, okay.
30.
Those are rare moments. The average time for Baron takes are near 26 to 27 minutes.
Sure.
Right? And your Baron lasts for 2.5 minutes?
3.
3 minutes? Yeah, so by that point, you hit the 31-minute mark.
Yep.
And you should have closed out your game. It's rare for me, even if you're a team that can solidly claim the Baron at 20 minutes, that should more than inform that you should probably be ending it faster also. And I don't mean like brute force it. It means that you should already be in a position where it's easy for you to set up a clean way to close. This is a thing I had a huge issue with during the spring playoffs for MSI, was that like the deciding factor for many teams was, one, how aggressive were they, and two, can they close cleanly and quickly. And the only teams that were really good at closing quickly and cleanly were Damwon, Mad, and RNG, which are the top 3 contenders at this point. RNG, however, has not qualified. They've been a little silly. And this is the same scenario, right? If you're going to pick very high complex compositions in a meta that requires you to do so, you're going to have to know how to properly set it up to close cleanly. Yeah. And like every so often I'll see a team like with splashes of brilliance in some of the emerging regions and even bigger brilliances in like the legacy regions. But like C9, awful at closing. I just fucking can't. What did they what the fuck did TSM lose? Rogue, same problem. I can't speak much on Gen because they played one playoff series and auto-qualified to Worlds, and they're not playing any others, but they lost. So like I can't really speak on them. T1, just mixed bag.
For the viewers, I think why we're sad about the TSM C9 thing, just at least me personally, you can say if you agree or not, is that TSM, like with like the way that Swordheart and Huni play stuff, is like they're the better team at like the wave management and the shot calling and these decisions, and it's like, and they would likely do better against these stronger teams just because they're able to probably make decision making better, at least in C9. Whereas C9 winning games is more so Blabber and Perks outplaying people when they do. So it's like, do we expect them to be the top teams in the world?
No.
Well, if Blabber and Perks can outplay the top players in the world, maybe. But do we expect that? Not really. Like,
I actually, and bold take, record me now. This is the 29th at 12:43 a.m. I don't think Cloud9's going to make it out of play-ins if they're using a play-ins format. They're going to crucify me. And I just, looking at the 100 Thieves game, I literally look at it, I'm like, 100 Thieves is okay. Out of the 13 teams that have qualified, I put them at 10th. Right, and you think, oh, what does that mean? Well, I just shat talk Rogue, and I put them as worse than Rogue. I put C9 above the Latin American team that just qualified today. It's the only minor region to have a team that qualified.
Mhm.
They're literally the worst out of the 12 teams that have qualified from their major regions. By far.
Because they don't have the coordination. They don't have the ability to close out games cleanly or anything.
Yeah,
They throw
correct.
leads.
Yeah, exactly. And this is speaking from the fact that I put them worse than the two Pacific region teams that have qualified in PSG and Beyond Gaming, who have like interesting mixed bagged approaches to the game. But PSG has literally only lost 3 games the entirety of summer, and that is
They
to
looked good
and that's
last year.
literally to the other team that qualified
Yeah.
in the best of 5, and they're about to do their rematch grand finals. Um, but like they're much like I cannot. I watch PSG play in a region that is by far worse than the LCS, and I go, fuck, they are better than 2 of the 3 teams we're sending.
Do you think PSG will have a comparable Worlds run to how they did last year, where like they were pleasantly?
I do, yes.
Okay,
I
cool.
literally put them at 8th. I put them in the top 8 so far of the teams that have qualified.
So like seeing them make it to like the actual quarterfinals kind of thing would be.
The thing is that 3 of the LPL teams, like 3 of the 4 LPL teams have yet to qualify,
Oh, okay,
and
okay.
1
This
of the 4 LCK teams have yet to qualify. I'm saying out of
right.
the 14 teams, or
So far they're 8th. Okay,
out of the 13 teams so far, they're in top 8,
just
just
interested in your
behind Team
opinion.
Liquid.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, as to like anybody who wants to know, and if you want to argue about that, I've watched 264 games since August 7th to make my cases. I will argue it all day. I will do it again on Twitter when they're like, "Oh, look at the world's things." That's my else. And I'll be like, "Well, you can be fanboy all you want."
Your Worlds takes got a lot of opinion last year, didn't
It got a lot of opinions
they?
that I was mostly right about. I don't know what the fuck TSM was on, which is like my only egregious error. But everything else was almost spot on correct. Um, where was I going? What was the next thing? Oh, yes. I thought it was interesting that double mages have been on the decline of picks this week.
Yeah, I was watching for it after you mentioned it, and I didn't really see it too much.
Mm-hmm. The what seems like the first 2 weeks was super popular because of the aforementioned. It's easier to do wave management with 2 mages and then have a bunch of melee ADs to help with the rest.
Mhm.
For like disengage or re-engage or team fighting, whatever the muck you want. Um, but people have found out that because sieging and wave management comps require a ranged AD, that they've scaled back on the double mages or the double AP options, to the point where like the option for mages are either you pick an AD jungle and mage mid, or you pick a mage mid and then dual split pushers, or a mage jungle and dual split pushers.
Yeah.
The most popular combination that I freaking adore, it's great, is the Aurelia Diana Rise. And I'm waiting for a moment where Rise is put top lane. It's likely never gonna happen. There's like
Hmm.
most of the regions that I think would do it, they have anywhere between 1 to 5 series left, and the teams that are gonna do it are likely not gonna like experiment that wildly. And I don't have any confidence the minor regions even
Uh,
know if that would be a possibility.
hmm. it's like I really don't think it has the thing with Rise Top is it has bad matchups into like the Gangplank and the Jace and stuff. I feel like
Sure. I mean, Jace has
so
been flexed to mid lane.
yeah.
Same with Renekton. I think the solo lane options for matchups are not the primary thing. People will pick Gangplank into bad matchups on a regular basis with the sole intent to put focus there so that he can survive the laning phase so that it's easier to use him as part of your win conditions. I don't think matchups are an issue here. The only time that I ever think matchups are like a primary focus is if your team is not looking to play wave management, they're looking to play team fights.
Sure. What is your opinion on, like, I think we've basically seen like the engage, tank supports pretty much worldwide, except Europe is playing enchanters. In a general statement.
Yeah, in a
Like they're playing
general
the
statement.
Lulu of the
I guess
Rakan.
this ties into what I also wanted to bring up, but just to answer the question primarily,
Mhm.
I think that if you're going to go for siege compositions that require a lot of disengage, fantastic, right? It helps inform primarily the type of win condition that is necessary for what you're trying to do, and oftentimes tank engage supports with the right enchanter are useless because you're never answering their team fights on their terms. You are disengaging their team fight options, and then whenever they're in a bad spot where they're forced to make an error, that's when they're fighting on your terms. And then that's great. It doesn't always play out that way. Sometimes they're played a little too aggressively for my liking, but that's primarily the thing. And I think this was beautifully exemplified. Exemplified?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Okay. Pardon English being my second language. This is beautifully exemplified in the rise of Bard,
Okay.
who fits a nice middle ground between tank engages and enchanter.
Almost for Khan too.
Yeah, almost.
Well, he's the engaged enchanter, but yeah.
But yeah, both of them fit this weird niche of being like an in between of the two. And
Yeah.
I've loved it. I mean, I have mixed emotions based off of the kind of composition that he's put into, but I like the kind of disruption he has in terms of like teams aggressively wanting to fight and Bard just being like, nope.
Yeah, and you were saying how you, in a meta where Herald priority is a huge thing, Bard countering that can be quite good.
Yep.
Yeah.
I don't think it's being used to its fullest properly. Granted, it's been a while since it's been in the meta, so like I can understand some like growing pains regarding it. But I would not be surprised if Bard is a priority support pick come Worlds, especially since we talked about it last time. With the item changes, it looks like assassins are coming back.
Yeah, they definitely wanted, because they've been missing.
Yeah.
Especially from pro play and stuff, there's been basically no assassins in any role. Like, what's
Unless
the
you want
closest
to
thing to
talk
an
about
assassin
Poke
that's meta?
LeBlanc.
Yeah, but like, that's the thing. Like, LeBlanc isn't played necessarily to one-shot people. It's like, I'm going to go in and do a bunch of your health, not actually necessarily kill you. It's like they're playing LeBlanc to counter the siege comp, saying like, well, it's now dangerous for you to walk up because you have 40% health. So like, I'm not going to kill you the first time, but I'm going to make it so you can't go in the second time. Is that how we usually play assassins in the league?
Is that how we play assassins? Yeah, it's apparently how we play assassins. God, there's too many types of roles that Riot has pigeonholed themselves that there are no good ways to answer. And there's like, there's only two roles
Yeah.
that make sense that are really easy to do: mages and ADCs. Every other role has either too many issues that are like make them too powerful or too weak to even consider.
Yeah, because we have the um like the role that like, you know, I play a lot of Thresh and stuff. It's like the what's the term for it? The right is a term. It's like the Guardians or something, where it's like the defensive tank supports.
Right.
And
Yeah.
it's like the way that role by its nature is pretty much relevant in every single meta.
Yep.
Like there's never almost been a time when like Thresh isn't playable. Just because of what he does. Like the way his kit is, he could do absolutely 0 damage and still be reasonably playable.
There's 1 year he was not a viable pick in professional play, but I think it's because there are way too many
Like
supports.
Ardent Sense meta or something where like
Yeah, no, that was it. Yeah,
but that's just because like Ardent Sense meta.
but that's the thing, right?
It didn't mean Thresh was bad. It just meant there's a thing that's broken that's making like, Janna and Lulu broken, so
Yeah.
yeah.
I had one last question. What was it again? Okay, yes. So most of the regions across the board are playing the same meta, not necessarily to their win conditions, but they are still opting into it via their drafts because those are the meta picks.
Okay.
Out of all of the regions that you've gotten the chance to look at, either through stats or anything of that sort, which region do you think has the best grasp on it?
Ooh. Yeah, I was kind of talking about this too because it's like it's interesting how everyone seems to have a slightly different take on it. It's like the LCS is missing a whole bunch of things. They play the meta in general, but they're missing a bunch. And like the LEC is like they're playing the meta, but then they're also been like we're gonna sprinkle in more of these kind of counter picks. They've played, they played the game of Darius, they played a game of Cassiopeia, and these kind of things. And they're playing enchanters, and it's like okay, they're to have a different take. And like LCK is like we're playing the meta plus AP top laners and stuff, right? And it's like, so everyone, it's like, no examples immediately coming to mind for China, maybe just the Jacks and stuff, but like, all the major regions, I've mostly just been watching the major. I haven't really watched as much of the minor because I don't watch every single game. But everyone is almost playing. We're doing the meta, like the generic stuff that's played everywhere, plus X, and it's like, is the X that they're adding correct? And there's arguments that it is, really, for everybody. So it's like, is Europe saying like, yeah, Enchanters have a place in the meta? Is that correct? That's your question. It's like, well, you could argue yes, and you could argue no. And like I think Korea's probably right. Kennen and Gwen should have a place in the meta. Do they have it too much? Are they correct?
So my question then, so it's because you're wishy-washy with it.
Yeah, I know. Sorry.
Which region do you think is the most correct?
The most correct.
Yes. So like how like you look at a multiple choice question, and you're like, well, all of these are technically correct, and they're like, you got to answer the one that's the most correct, and you're like, this is bullshit. Which region do you think is the most correct in their approach? And I don't mean by like which team in that region does it. It's like in general, because a team tends to inform the rest.
Yeah. I guess the most correct. I guess it would have to be China, even though I don't like Trundle as like the top tier support at a couple of these things. they're still, they had the best overall, like, they have 65 overall champions played, just glancing at that now, just quickly.
Yeah.
They're sprinkling the stuff in to, like, make it interesting, which I like. It's like they played a game of Zac support.
And jungle.
Yeah, it's like, hey, it's cool. So, like, I kind of like seeing those kind of, everyone does, right? Like, you lock in that and it's like, oh, this will be interesting. It's cool to watch. Like, when you're up locked in Pantheon, or North America locked in Pantheon, so it's like, hey, this is interesting. At least it's something different. It's not going to be the same old game I'm watching. So they have enough of that to make it interesting. But they still have the kind of, like, they've played the double mages, like they said. They've, played a few games of the Vayne. They've played the Rakan that we were talking about, but they're still mostly just playing tanks. They've played a few games of the Aphelios and the Vayne, and even the Syndra bot. Like, we've seen it. We've seen this, right? Like, they're doing all the stuff that's in the meta that we're discussing, for the most part, whether or not it's working for them.
Yeah. Do you want to hear my controversial answer?
Okay.
Okay. You're ready for this? This will be wild for a lot of people who have never seen it. I think the PCS. Everybody's going to crucify me. I think the PCS has the best approach. If you look at their spread, you'll be like, well, they're very limiting in their spread. There's not that many options that they have going on over here. And you're absolutely right. But then you look at some of the key things in their spread, and then you go like, oh, wait, there's a little bit of every region going on in this one here.
Okay.
Do you notice that? Everything except for Europe. No, I think there's still some European tendencies in some of the picks that are going on there. Now, this
Rakan
region
is number 3 on the support list, so can't argue that. Yeah.
So, like, I think they've striked a balance that I really enjoy, and like the two teams, and I'm gonna go on a semi rant here. The PCS is a controversial region, as it is. I consider it a legacy region because it is technically the GPL and the LMS of old, but like after 2 forms of defunding, to new forms of refunding.
Okay.
And they only ever have 2 to 3 good teams, and everybody else is just really bad. But because the region itself has a really robust amateur league that's really good, the pick and bans are not terrible. They all inform proper win conditions, and whether or not they actually apply the win conditions properly is a whole other story. But they have the best read of it in a way that like shows that like they've considered all of the different variants that exist and have like a perfect spread for each of the options.
100% pick ban Ziggs and Renekton.
Yeah. What did I say about those 2 champions being Renekton is flexible and is used for split pushing and wave management. Ziggs is used for sieging. Yeah. So like in this instance, I think they have the most correct, not necessarily like I can't guarantee that they are the ones that are right, but they have the most correct in the sense that like they're the safe ones. They take the safest approach. They do all of the AP top laners as well as the AD top laners, the split pushers, the biggest range of supports, and all of the junglers and everything in between.
Some stuff here I'm not really seeing elsewhere. Like there's a lot of Volibear and Alistar.
Yeah.
Relatively.
They're very good at disengaging other engaged supports, and when a range of a lot of the junglers get banned, the equivalent to team fighting junglers that are also good at helping disengage things but also are used for sieging is Volibear.
And then Nidalee and Graves.
Nidalee is informed from the Renekton. that has 100% presence. Graves is because some dipshit decided to pick Graves. That one I can't really tell you is a good pick. That one's just I saw that and I went,
it's 2-0.
it's still one. You can't. It's very good at sieging and wave clearing, but it's not meant for that.
Whoa, this is spicy. Vladimir?
Vladimir's one person that does it.
One person. Okay.
Yeah, one
But
person.
it's only 2 games, but
Yeah, and I think it was primarily because it was an answer to the LeBlanc.
okay.
Yeah.
So 2-0. Yeah.
Yeah. A lot of the niche picks are used as specific counters to
For sure. Yep.
existing things. And like,
Yep. Like
what I'm saying, it's the most correct is it's the safest approach to the rest of the meta because they essentially look at everywhere else and go like, ooh, that's something spicy. How does this work? And if they're like, nope, they never use it. But if it's something that seems to have a upwards trend, they do use it. I think it's actually the place that I first saw the Bard.
yeah. It's like just for the LeBlanc thing, it's like how you counter LeBlanc is something that has the obvious chains are easy, you know it's coming. So it's like what can counter the obvious chains? Like you can put something on, stop it. It's like the Vladimir who can cool, the Lissandra who can self alt or be in her E if you time it perfectly. Or the Morgana with the shield. It's like these are the obvious initial LeBlanc counters because we can never get rooted by you ever.
Yep. So yeah, that's my answer. Honorable mentions to the LCO, who, despite their shenaniganries, and I still consider them the worst region, have significantly leveled up in their pick bans from being simple as heck to actually thinking things through, which is surprising to me in all of the aspects, and yet still somehow disappointed in that they still keep team fighting. There's only so much you can do. You can take LCO out of the team fight, but you can't take the team fight out of the LCO. But those are my honorable mention because I do have to give kudos to a huge improvement in the region. Whose finals is this week? Actually, every last person's. There's literally only like, quite literally, 1, 2. There are 8 days left.
Yeah.
Yeah, there are 8 days left of playoffs and regionals. So like, it's gonna come hit us like a truck. All the last teams that are gonna qualify.
Yeah.
Do you have any final thoughts?
I think I'm good at the moment. I guess, yeah.
All right. For those who watched, thank you for watching all the way through this. Let us know in the comments down below if there are any new trends from this week that you enjoyed. Did you think there's a region that's most capable, like that has been the most right in terms of the meta preview? Are there teams that have been absolutely blowing you away and others that have been annoying you to heck? Do you
Fnatic with pausing games.
if you do you think Fnatic's Miracle Run is the best thing in the world? I do. It's fantastic. Yeah, just let us know your thoughts down below. If you did enjoy watching this also, please leave a like and subscribe. And I'm Sam, that's Connor, and we'll see you next time. Bye.